Journey started in a blind, unadulterated, and total panic. It started as a way to impose some semblance of control and order on a mind feeling crushed by the weight of unrelenting, unstoppable time. Which, if you think about it, is exactly what a photograph does, at least according to the likes of Berger and Sontag. I think it would be fair to say that time really isn't on my side when it comes to my photographic practice. It's fair to say that up until this course, I had not actively thought about how I approached my practice in anything more than a surface manner. What has become clear, as discussed in Kavana and Fox, is that my inspiration for work is often found in a myriad of sources. These ideas are nebulous at best, but become solidified through a process of making images and research. However, at the core of this is a feeling of what is right. Klein suggests the knowledge that artistic research strives for is a felt knowledge. I seldom go out to shoot knowing exactly what I want, often allowing the work to show me the way. In the course of creating this current work, there were some false starts, mostly due to an attempt to force an idea without being that inspired by one. My first thoughts were to build on an earlier idea of looking at the economic decline and social inequality within my hometown, utilizing a mixture of repeat photography, street photography, and a documentary style. As Riga states, the most basic strategy we can use in studying social change visually is to re-photograph sites or things that we previously documented. Thus, archival shots were to be contrasted with new images and interspersed with candid shots of people on the streets. I simply was not feeling this. The images felt surface and lacking saying anything new. On reflection, part of the issue was the way I chose to shoot the faces, anonymously. As Azule states, every photograph of others bears the trace of the meeting between the photograph person and the photographer, neither of whom can, on their own, determine how this meeting will be described in the resulting image. As there had been no real meeting, and the image was taken forcibly, in a way Sontag would deride, this led to ethical discomfort, which could also feed into poverty porn. As Rosler states, documentary photography has historically fetishized social inequality. In future, if such endeavors were to be made, a much more collaborative approach would be taken. The inspiring idea for Jenny was an exploration of time and distance, born out of the requirement of 2 long train journeys. Lynch's comment, "We are aware that time inside is different from time outside," had resonated, and the writings of Flusser were percolating. Several methods would be used. A variation of rephotography, with an image being taken every 20 minutes of the 15 hours travel. A condensed attempt to see if I could find a change. Collaboration, asking random people every few shots to take the image that they wished. This was a means of comparing and contrasting them to my own vision to see what would happen. There was also an environmental element in the hope of comparing the rural and urban environments that the train passed through as a commentary. I also wished to look at the mundane in a similar vein to my Ed Ruscha-inspired work. As Sontag suggests, one finds that there is beauty or at least interest in everything seen with an acute enough eye. Finally, there was an element of wanting to attempt to use the camera in a non-conventional way, inspired by Flusser. In this case, in a very similar way to Muller-Pohl, and just pressing the shutter without aiming or focusing the camera. The plan was to evaluate the images afterwards and let them lead me to what I was trying to say, to find what spoke to me. It is true that Klein suggests art without research is lacking an essential foundation, and although I did not have a fully formed idea, it was not without direction. I was looking at this as a form of research to inform further developments. The collaboration images were quickly rejected. Put simply, I had seen them all before, on any Instagram account. This could be linked to Flusser's idea that most snaps are redundant images, which have become unremarkable as they bring no new information. This having been said, it has not escaped me that I am just fitting into a program, trying to be a photographer as he defines. The challenge for the photographer to oppose the flood of redundancy with the informative images. Kavana and Fox make it clear that evaluation and research are paramount to inform changes in the project. Thus, research of other photographers' work was invaluable. I felt that whilst the strong human element was there, with reference and inspiration from the likes of Maurice Broomfield, Siv Kondeleka, and Bernd and Hilla Betcher, the natural comparison was lost. Whilst the works of Kilmerk and Foglia resonated, it was the images of Agnieszka Lepka that really gave inspiration and led to shooting more elements for the work. Her diptychs were the direct inspiration for my own, but turning it to highlight the unnatural nature of our aesthetic instead of showing how we are similar. Studying transformation by Mullapole also led to refinement of the image selection, trying not to be afraid of including images I felt resonated despite not being technically correct. There have been many instances where I've had to let go of images that I truly liked because quite simply they did not fit with what the project was becoming. Going forward, there are many elements of those strategies used that I wish to refine in my future practice. To embrace that the process of creating images can give direction to the work, but also to improve the initial research to help refine my initial ideas to some extent. To improve my collaborations and take on board what Azule writes about. However, mostly to reflect on my practice whilst accepting what works for me. I was hoping to produce images that would go into a photo book. My last book was all about narrative, and this seemed a logical next step. I quickly moved away from this, following on from an idea of Mark Jenkins, who stated, "I want to use cameras to manipulate time. I did not want a linear progression." And as Kohlberg states, the task of the sequence is to take the viewer from beginning to end in a way that makes sense, which therefore ruled out the use of a photo book. Likewise, similar issues would also be found in a gallery space, as well as the uncomfortable issue of the commodification of art. As Ash Grimm says, we are coerced into adapting ourselves and our skills into fitting into the role of benefiting capitalism. Being that there is an underlying criticism of industrialization and capitalism within the work, a gallery exhibition would seem a little hypocritical. Thus, dissemination of this work is something that needs to be considered, and indeed, with my practice as a whole, as Journeys does question or at least gaze at our dualistic attitude to environment and our indoctrination through normalizing images of capitalism, as Sontag and Flusser highlight, it is only right to address the sustainability of our own practice. To this extent, my equipment is digital and often sourced secondhand. I do not utilize a car to travel, and I do not often print or display my work, making my personal impact small. However, one must consider that the resources to create the equipment, the power required to store the images, and the simple industrial scale of the resource extraction to fuel the industry must be acknowledged. Every major producer of equipment often make grand statements as to their green credentials. Nikon is no exception. However, the means to check on their progress is difficult at best, if not downright impossible. Fox and Aldred also make it an interesting point. A further neoliberal twist is green capitalism, in which profit and entrepreneurialism are considered the means to save the earth from climate change. The irony is not lost. This leaves us as individual photographers in a state of uncertainty. However, what I am certain of is that photography should not end and still has something to say.